Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a book review, and that book review is going to be Don't Want You Like a Best Friend by Elma Albin. This is the first book in what right now is a duology, but we'll say companion romance series. And because it's a companion, you can read this as a standalone, and kind of the gist of it is that it is a adult romance set in the Victorian era, and it kind of has a rom-com kind of feel to it. And because it's a romance, obviously we're following two characters falling in love, and our main characters are Gwen and Beth. Gwen is a debutante who is not new to the season of London. She's done this rodeo, I believe, 4 times before now, being basically put in the marriage mart to try and find a husband in Victorian England. But she is like rich enough that she just doesn't have to worry about that, and it's not her main goal. She's never found a guy that she's been interested in, so she hasn't really tried to find a husband. Her dad is a widow and also kind of a little bit of a charming, not quite a rake, but definitely like very charming, gets up to trouble, and kind of lets Gwen get away with stuff, lets Gwen wear pants, do horse riding, fencing, all that kind of stuff. And he wants his daughter to find a good partner, he wants her to settle down, but he's just kind of letting Gwen do things at her own pace and kind of goof around. Beth, on the other hand, our other main character, is coming from a very different financial situation. Father just recently passed, and he was kind of a awful person and kind of left her and her mother with nothing. So this is going to be Beth's first season, and it is vitally important that she finds a husband, because otherwise her mom and her are going to be out on the street. So she needs to find somebody that can support her. Very common trope for Regency Victorian England kind of stuff, but just a nice spin on it, because obviously we know that it's going to be these two lovely ladies falling in love with each other. And so kind of the big conceit besides the romance is that when Gwen and Beth introduce their parents, they kind of find out that there is a little bit of history between them, and there definitely is some like tension between them. And so their goal is to like figure out what's going on with them, and kind of like a parent trap situation where they try to get them together, not only because it would solve all of their marital problems, but it would make their parents hopefully very happy and have like a real love, because both of their parents were unlucky with their romantic partner picks in the past. So with that, you're getting a very rom-com, hijinks kind of fun trope, lots of matchmaking kind of vibes. And the further into the book that we get, of course, it's two women that are trying to love each other in a very strict society where that is not allowed, and a financial situation with Beth, obviously, so there is a lot of turmoil, angst, melodrama in the second half of this novel. So that's kind of the feel of this book, the tone. I ended up giving this like a 3.75 stars. Honestly, I had just read a lot of high fantasy, very dense, very serious books, and I needed something silly, I needed something fun, something to keep me out of a slump, and this fulfilled that, so it was perfect for the moment that I read it. It just fulfilled everything that I needed. Again, it was a lot of fun. I did have some gripes with it. I felt like the second half dragged a little bit for me, and the kind of third act conflict comes a little bit early. Their breakup period is a little bit early, and with that breakup, honestly, I would have preferred a lot more like angsty yearningness. Like, these two women know the situation that they're in, so for me personally, I would have preferred that third act breakup to be a lot more like angst and pining and yearning for each other versus kind of like the bitterness that we see from Gwen. And with that, I just want to talk about the trigger warnings or content warnings for this book as well. There is implied homophobia, of course, a lot of misogyny, domestic abuse, a threat of violence, substance abuse being alcohol, and there is also a big threat of discovery, like finding Gwen and Beth making out in a maze. Like, there's that threat of discovery, but nobody that discovers them is ever against them. I know this was a moment that gave me a lot of anxiety, so I just wanted to make you aware. Yes, there is like a threat of discovery, but whenever they are discovered, it's by like a parent or a friend or someone that knows the situation and is not going to out them, basically. So for me, I had a good time. Again, I had some gripes. I would have loved a little bit more focus on the yearning, a little bit more focus on the matchmaking of the parents, especially in the later half of the book, but overall, it was fun. It fulfilled exactly what I needed, and I would recommend this book. That being said, this book, when I went on Goodreads, I was very surprised to see how divided the reviews were. There's a lot of people giving this 4, 5 stars, giving it really high praise. And on the other hand, there's not a lot of 3s, which is where I think the book really falls in for me as a debut author, as a book that hit a lot of the things that it was trying to do while also not being perfect. But there were a lot of 1 stars, a lot of 2 stars, and just really interesting comments along with those low reviews. So I kind of wanted to look at that and discuss what some people are not enjoying, because that may be a point where you might not enjoy this novel, but also you know, coming in with my own interpretations and not necessarily agreeing or seeing why people aren't liking certain things. So one of the big things that people were discussing with this book was the insta-love or insta-chemistry between the two characters. I really didn't see this as a problem. Gwen and Beth meet like in the first chapter. They become instant friends with each other. For me, at least, it didn't seem like there was immediate attraction between the two, or at least they didn't realize there was immediate attraction between the two. It takes them a while to kind of realize their feelings for each other, especially because they haven't really been exposed to this world. And for me, I just really liked Beth and Gwen's voice. I thought they were fun characters. I really liked their emotional baggage. They had a lot of stuff to work through. So for me, the characters were set up well. I instantly liked them being put as a friendship together. And so to see that friendship grow and build made sense to me. And to me, it just didn't seem like an immediate build to romance. So I'm not disagreeing with the comment because like to each their own kind of a thing, but I definitely don't see it in this case. The other thing that people had a problem with was the third act breakup. Like I said, this was also an issue for me. Again, they're being very angsty with each other, they're being very messy, very bitter, and not coming from a place of understanding. Yes, these girls are about 20, 21, so that immaturity kind of makes sense, but also it was a little bit annoying just because I felt like you could still have that kind of angst and third act breakup without them feeling bitter or being combative with each other. Like you could have had a mutual third act breakup without either of them really feeling like they want to break up. You know what I mean? So yes, I agree with that. I don't think it brought the novel entirely down for me though. I still, again, kept it at a 3.75, but I can see why people would get annoyed by it and just not like the path that that story went down, because again, I had problems with it as well. The other thing with the third act breakup is this book is definitely a book of messy characters, messy conflict, just messiness, and if you have seen me discuss any queer books, I love quarter life crisis books. I love characters going on a self-discovery journey. I really like messy relationship dynamics, so that just already fits into what I like. And I know a lot of people don't like that, so be aware. Messiness, characters making mistakes, being flawed, doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, it's definitely a part of this book, but it is something that I enjoy, that I just know that not everybody enjoys. So if people are picking up on that and it's not something that I picked up on, or just like not picking up on that I disliked it, there is a reason why, so I don't necessarily disagree with this comment, but I think it is a good thing to know going in. If you don't like super messy dynamics, I don't think this is the messiest that I've seen, but I can see why people would have that comment and why they might not like it. I just think it's more enjoyable to read about characters who make mistakes than characters who don't. And so for me, I am very forgiving of characters in books now. Obviously are something that I don't forgive, but for the most part, I feel like I'm a very forgiving reader where I allow myself to go along with the characters' antics where other people necessarily might not. And then the final comment that I saw a lot that I just found very interesting and which kind of put me on this rabbit hole of looking at Goodreads comments was people did not like the stepsister angle of this book. So basically the whole plot line is to kind of parent trap these two parents into getting together, which would make Beth and Gwen stepsisters. I initially don't like have a problem with that. Like they're in a difficult situation. They didn't know that they were going to fall in love with each other as they were putting out this plot. But yeah, it's a nice perk that if their parents get together, that they also get to cohabitate. And apparently at the end, there is a line where Beth or Gwen, probably Gwen, says something about like getting to be stepsisters now. I honestly don't remember this line. I don't remember seeing it in a weird way, but apparently a lot of people just really did not like that sentiment of them like getting to be stepsisters and like be in a relationship. And I'm sorry, but for the most part, I think this is a really disingenuous critique. I can see why this dynamic would be off-putting, but like they're both in their 20s. You know, they're not kids that are going to be growing up with each other. If there was a weird line with like putting them as like stepsisters but in a relationship, like I can see why that would be off-putting. Again, I didn't read it this way. I didn't see that comment. It didn't really affect me when I was reading it. And I think for the most part, it is coming from like a disingenuous kind of reader. But that's not to say like if somebody read that line and just like it really didn't vibe with them, that they aren't allowed to feel a certain way about it, that they're not, you know, you're definitely allowed to be like, hey, this crossed the line for me. I didn't like this. This was a weird comment to make. This shouldn't have been in the book. And I didn't like the book because of that. Like that is totally a-okay. But I do think that, at least from the Goodreads reviews that I was reading, it didn't come across that way. It just felt kind of disingenuous. And those comments, a lot of these comments were just like really interesting. The negative reviews were really interesting, not just because of the lesbian stepsister comment, but also like things people were bringing up in reviews, bringing up the fact that this author is obviously a call to Taylor Swift. People saying this book is bad because this is a Swiftie author. Like, it was getting to the point where I was reading Goodreads comments and I'm like, did this author do something that I don't know of other than being a Swiftie? And like, yeah, Taylor Swift has her problems, like, we can discuss that, but obviously this novel title was chosen before really Taylor Swift became a big topic of debate in the last couple months. Not that she hasn't always been a topic, especially for her jet fuel issues, but I feel like it's very disingenuous to like hate on an author and to like give her like 1-2 stars because of her relation to another person instead of like the acts that she does herself, like inferring things about an author because of stuff. Like, it's kind of weird. And like, if you're not a Swiftie and you're very much against like Swiftie culture or Taylor Swift or people that like Taylor Swift, like, fine, don't read this book. It's, you know, that's fine. But the comments were just so weird that I'm just like, did this author do something that I don't know of? Said something online? Is there author tea that I don't know of? I really couldn't find anything. Maybe I missed it, but it just, there was definitely some weirdness. I don't necessarily disagree with everything. Like I said, these were the grievances people had. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. But it felt weird, the star rating and the bitterness people seem to have in Goodreads reviews. But again, it's Goodreads. You know, people are weird. But going back into negative reviews themselves, the other final thing that people were talking about was historical inaccuracies. I saw people really getting very nitpicky, and I get it. There are books out there that I have really disliked because of historical inaccuracies, or it just didn't feel right enough to me, but Regency romance and Victorian romance, like, it is a whole genre onto itself that is very sometimes divorced from historical accuracy just because of the history it's had. I think it is totally a-okay to not want to read a book because it is historically inaccurate, or to not like something because those things are like picking at the back of your brain when you're reading. But for me, this hit all of the beats of a historical fiction that I needed. And the other big thing is that this is not a literary fiction. It is not a serious historical fiction, in my opinion. This is very much a rom-com. This is very silly, and it set itself up to have a silly tone and to kind of bypass inaccuracies. And honestly, the inaccuracies that people were picking up on was like language things, just different stuff that when I was reading, I honestly picked up in a different book, but like I wasn't picking up on it here because again, the tone, the style, it was set up to kind of be a little bit more playful, to be a little bit more loosey-goosey. So like historical accuracy, if that's a thing that you need, if you need it to be a certain way, you're not gonna like this book. But if you can be kind of forgiving to historical accuracies, especially when particular tones or styles are incorporated, then yes, I think you'll be fine with this. So like, I can see where people are going with the historical inaccuracy thing. I get it. I have books like that too. But for me, this didn't personally bother me because of the tone, the playfulness, the way the author set up the story. And honestly, historical accuracy is not always the best road to go down for certain types of novels. It isn't. It doesn't always make sense. Messiness, the third act breakup, and historical inaccuracy, those were like the most genuine of the critiques that I was seeing, and I get it. Like, if you don't like certain things like that, you're not gonna like this book. But for me, again, it worked well together. I had some gripes with this book, but in the end, it worked well. So another thing that I liked about this novel, and that really brought up some questions for me about what I want from these kind of novels, is the fact that we have queer elders in this book. I really appreciated that. Gwen has a housekeeper and I believe a maid who have been together for years. The father knows about this, has accepted them, and at the end of the book, we are setting up who our main characters of the sequel are going to be. So it seems like in the next book, Gwen and Beth will start to form a queer, like, friend group, and those things are always really important to me in books, and I really appreciated those characters being here and being set up in here. But I will say, this book, I'm not going to critique it for not having this or fault it for not having this, but this book definitely made me yearn for a different type of historical fiction novel that I'm definitely going to be looking for in the future, and that is like a historically accurate or somewhat historically accurate representation of a queer community in historical fiction, especially like Regency Victorian times, because like, we know queer people have always existed. They found ways to exist in society. We have some accounts, we have some knowledge that even in Victorian and Regency time periods, these people were existing, that they were finding each other, that they were forming relationships and kind of getting around rules. And I really want a book especially like a Regency book that really uses history to back itself up and kind of shows like the queer parties and the queer like friendship groups that were able to form and work, like lavender marriages. I'd love for that to be more explored. And also I want to see more queer historical characters that were able to pull at the fringes of gender expression and gender identity, because we know those people existed as well. People that lived out their lives as a different gender or in between genders, we know those people existed even in very strict time periods like this. And I want to see that. I want to see that played with more. I want a book that is just, you know, about a queer person moving to London and finding this queer community that they didn't know existed and getting invited into that space and living in that space with elder queers and younger queers and finding relationships. Like, that's what I really, really want. And it probably exists. I would love to find it. And again, I also want to explore especially more queer people that were born as women who exist and lived either as a different gender or played with their gender expression. I know there's a show called Gentleman Jack that kind of deals with that, but like, you know, I guess I just want more historical butches, you know, like that's what I want. Because I know they existed and, you know, sometimes they got into trouble, but they were still able to, you know, survive in a lot of cases. And, you know, maybe this is going to end up being like a tragic novel, but I think there is a lot of room for hope and joy in these kind of setups as well, because again, these people did exist and survive somehow. So as much fun as this novel was, as much as I enjoyed it, it did have me yearning for that kind of story as well, something with more historical accuracy, because I do believe there is a place for this, for a femme, really fun historical rom-com kind of book, but there's also room for the more historically accurate, the more queer, the more different gender expressions. There is room for that novel as well, and both can exist and find a place together. But yeah, overall, those are my hopes and dreams and desires, but it was fun. It hit every beat that I needed it to. It was messy, it was chaotic, it was characters discovering themselves, it was just fun and rompy. I could have used a little bit more of the marriage plotline, the little bit of the romp we had there, because I did really like the parents and really liked them falling in love. But overall, this hit all the beats that I was looking for, and again, it kept me out of a slump. It entertained me, it kept me engaged. It was really what I needed in the moment, and so maybe I wouldn't like this if I read it at a different time, but I read it at the perfect time, so it really worked for me. But yeah, those are my thoughts and criticisms for Don't Want You Like a Best Friend. If any of those points intrigue you, I definitely feel like you should check it out. I'm definitely going to be reading the second book. Kind of want to see that development of that queer friendship group thing that seems like it's coming. But this is my first review of 2024, and hopefully just one of many, because I do want to review more books this year. But I had a really good time reviewing this. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know if there's any other books you would like me to review. I hope you enjoyed, and happy reading.